Hey there everybody, this is Luke from Sunny Robotics, and today I'm going to show you guys how easy it is to make a direct drive hub motor weapon. A lot of times you might see this in like a beetle weight combat robot, and probably it's not too common when you get into the heavier weight classes, but it can still be done. But there's a lot of misconceptions about the difficulty in doing this. It's actually really easy to do once you kind of understand what's going on. This is going to be the direct drive weapon for my beetle weight combat robot Rickety Cricket. There's a lot of different ways to do hub motors, but this is a very simple way of doing it. There's more complex ways of doing it, but I kind of like things to be as simple as possible with the fewest amount of parts, and this is definitely one of the ways to do that. So first you start off with a brushless outrunner motor. It's an outrunner because the outside spins. That's kind of important. And you need to first take apart the motor. So you take this little C-clip off, and then you pull the two parts apart, and then it looks like this and this. So when you pull them apart, zoop, looks like this. I've gone ahead and battle hardened these, so that means I've epoxied the windings here, I've epoxied the magnets in, and then once you kind of have battle hardened the motors with glue, you cut off what you don't need. You get rid of all the parts you don't need, and in this case you cut the shaft off of this and you cut off the end of the bell. So once you're done doing that, you are left with just a ring o' magnets, just a magnet ring. Then as far as the stator goes, you need to press. We're going to run a dead axle through this, a dead shaft, so we're going to get rid of these bearings. So to get rid of the bearings, you can just take something like an arbor press here. If you don't have any good tool to punch out the bearings, you can just stick the Allen wrench in here, you go down, and then you can just press it out like that pretty easily. I'm going to leave this one alone for now because I might use this for something else. I don't want to get rid of those bearings right now. So then what you're left with is you're left with a stator here that has a hole in it. In this case, we're going to do a 10mm dead axle, so I actually had to drill this out a little bit. So you want to drill that so it's a real tight fit. This has a little bit of play in it. Probably better if it was a little tighter, but it still works. So we drilled that out to the size of the shaft that we're going to be using here, in this case 10mm. And that's pretty much all the prep you have to do as far as the motor's concerned. So that's the motor modifications that are needed. So these are kind of the two parts. As far as what needs to be machined, you kind of just need a way to transfer the spin-up torque into the weapon. So here we have a weapon here. This was laser cut for pretty cheap. This is a 3/8 inch AR 500. And this is a part that I had China make for me. This is kind of the magic sauce. So what you do here is you take this magnet ring, I use the arbor press, and you just kind of press it down. And then what this part allows you to do is just kind of transfer the spin-up torque through these screws here into the weapon. So let's go ahead and assemble this. It's pretty straightforward. You just kind of stick this on here. I want to use this shiny part, shiny side. Then you screw it in. So there we go. So now we have the weapon. We have some bearings in here. You have to use 2 bearings. It's very important to use 2 bearings. In this case, I'm using 2 flanged bearings. Flanged bearings kind of make this a little bit easier to keep everything retained. So I have 1 flange on this side, another bearing here, flange on this side, just kind of goes in there. This is a little loose. It's looser than I'd like, but that's just the way it came from the laser place. I'll probably make it a little tighter next time I order some laser cut weapons. And this is mostly it. This is the weapon system. The rest of it is just kind of assembling everything with the stator. So I'm going to try and do that here. This is kind of tricky to do with this robot because my weapon uprights are kind of one piece. Traditional vertical spinner usually has these parts separated, which makes the assembly a little bit easier. So I'm going to try my best to do this. It's really tricky to do all in one go. I should note that when this is being assembled, I have to use these little washers here that go up against the motor, and that's to stop the weapon from rubbing up against the motor windings. If you look here, the windings stick out farther than any other part going this direction, so I have to use these little washers here to give it some clearance. So I have a little trick assembling this. I kind of have to do it in a couple steps here. First I run this through here, I put these washers in here, then I stick the stator in here. Watch your fingers. Whoop. Okay, so now I know those washers are kind of lined up. So now I have to remove this. Now I have to try and assemble this in one go. This would be easier with a traditional vertical spinner, but let's see. It all has to go together in one piece. Give it a jiggle. This sometimes requires a little tap. There we go. And there you go. There you have it. So, oh, I think I have a little farther to go there. Get in there. There we go. I have, so there's a nylon spacer in there to keep everything kind of tight. And that's it. This is, so you got the axle there. And then I have this kind of lock nut. Well, that's not going on there too easily, but you can see then I line up these screws here. These are little M3 screws. And this stops the stator from rotating. So there you go. That's it. Spins really smoothly. I just tighten this up a little bit more. It's not being very cooperative right now, so I'll just leave that alone for now. But that's pretty much it. That's how you do a direct drive weapon. There are, of course, multiple ways of doing this. Key things to take away are, make sure you always use 2 bearings. I originally tried to do this with 1 bearing, and it just made everything too wobbly, and it resulted in, see, it wobbles a tiny bit, but not too much. When you use just 1 big bearing, what tends to happen is the bearing flexes so much that it will cause the magnets in here to stick to the stator. So if you use 2 bearings, it keeps everything nice and rigid, enough where that won't happen, no sticking. So that's it. So hopefully this was informative, and it might inspire some people to get rid of their belts, because there's nothing, I think, more sad than seeing broken belts. So that's it. Thanks for watching.